And then finally it says, if a person is pious and hears about these causes of devastation, he will feel hatred for all these, and that will cause his advancement in a life of piety. Piety refers to the process of cleansing the heart. And then it speaks about Chetodarpana Marjanam. So here, so this is how, if a person hears all this, then these are all the causes of devastation. One should feel hatred for all this, and therefore one tries to give up all these things. Okay. So here we find an important theme in this pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. And of course, here in the first verse, purport, Srila Prabhupada is speaking about gross sex life and how the 4 Kumaras gave it up and what are the benefits of observing brahmacharya. Srila Prabhupada is described. In the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, we all know how Dhruva Maharaj, he had some impurity when he began his practice of devotional service. There was some impurity. There was impurity of trying to gain a lot of wealth, prestige, a kingdom greater than his great-grandfather. So devotional service was there, but at the same time, the devotional service was contaminated by these material desires. So we'd just like to discuss something on this point of both gross and subtle sex. Okay, this is the benefit of hearing this description. Attains piety, washes sinful contamination. Next. क्या हो रहा है? Full screen नहीं हो रहा? Go ahead, please. Okay. So in a practice of devotional service, as the Bhakti Lata grows, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has described that along with the Bhakti Lata, as with the growth of any creeper, any crop, so many weeds also grow. And so, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is describing these weeds, Upashakha, Nishittajar, Kutinati, Jiva Himsana, Labha, Puja, Pratishtadi, Yatha Upashaka Gana. And then he's describing in detail. And then Srila Prabhupada and the purport is describing detail about all these various weeds, the Upashakas that grow along with the Bhakti Lata. And so the subtle sex life that has been described as Labha, Puja, and Pratishtha. And so it is described that gross sex life, one may be able to conquer after some practices of devotional service. But what is more difficult than the gross sex life is the subtle sex life in the form of Labha, Puja, Pratishtha. And Srila Prabhupada here writes in the last paragraph of this purport, he says, all these obstructions have been described in this verse as unwanted creepers. They simply present obstacles for the real creeper, the Bhakti Lata. One should be very careful to avoid all these unwanted things. So all that big list of symptoms of adharma, all these are unwanted things which can come along with the Bhakti Lata. So Prabhupada says one should be very careful to avoid. Sometimes these unwanted creepers look exactly like the Bhakti creeper. So we can all see, sometimes we say along with the crops, along with the, here in the garden, flower plants are growing, but along with them side by side, grass is also growing. And sometimes it may be very difficult to distinguish between the two. They also look green, this also looks green, everything looks same. And one may be thinking, oh, I'm progressing nicely, my Bhakti Lata is growing nicely. But actually, it may be simply the weeds that are growing. They appear to be of the same size And the same species, when they're packed together with the bhakti creeper. But in spite of this, the creepers are called upashakha. And then Prabhupada says, a pure devotee can distinguish between the bhakti creeper and a mundane creeper, and he is very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. So one has to be very alert, then only one can distinguish. So only when one goes close, then one can see the difference. Arey, this is weed, this is not the real crop. From far, everything will look very nice, everything will look green, everything will look wonderful. But only when one goes very close, one can see the difference. Therefore, one has to be extremely alert to distinguish. So this gross and subtle sex is Pralambasur. That is why you see the photo there, which could be there within our heart, the Pralambasur. And so one has to be very careful to distinguish. In the next verse, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, if one does not distinguish between the bhakti creeper and other creepers, the sprinkling of water is misused because the other creepers are nourished while the bhakti creeper is curtailed. So we are watering. So who takes the water? The weeds take the water and they grow very nicely. And the actual bhakti lata becomes stunted. So Prabhupada writes here, if one chants the Hare Krishna mantra while committing offenses, these unwanted creepers will grow. So this is one of the main reasons why the weeds grow. And that is, one is chanting Hare Krishna. Chanting Hare Krishna is supposed to purify one, but at the same time, one is committing offenses. So if one is committing offenses while chanting Hare Krishna, then we are pouring water on. So chanting Shravan Kirtan is Jala for the Bhakti Lata, that is Jala. But along with the Bhakti Lata, these weeds also grow when there are offenses. So therefore, one should not take advantage of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra for some material profit. The unwanted creepers have been described by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He states that if one hears and chants without trying to give up offenses, he states that if one hears and chants without trying to give up offenses, that means at least one must try. To what degree one may be successful, that's another thing. But at least the sincerity is one has to try to give up offenses as one is hearing and chanting. So if one hears and chants without trying to give up offenses and becomes materially attached to sense gratification, one may also desire freedom from material bondage like the Mayavadis, and then is describing a big list of what are the various anarthas, what are the various weeds that can grow if one is committing offenses while chanting Hare Krishna. Okay, so towards the end, he writes that how one tries to practice devotional service simply for getting some cheap adoration, material adoration, or one may desire mundane reputation by making compromises with non-devotees concerning one's philosophy or spiritual life, or one may become a supporter of the hereditary caste system. So all these pitfalls, all these are pitfalls of personal sense gratification. Just to cheat some innocent people, one makes a show of advanced spiritual life and becomes known as a sadhu, mahatma, or religious person. All this means that the so-called devotee has become victimized by all these unwanted creepers, and the real creeper, the bhakti lata, has been stunted. So all these are the symptoms by which one can understand that the weeds are growing. The main symptom is the motive for practicing devotional service changes. Initially, everyone practices devotional service with very pure motives. But if one is committing offenses, then the motives gradually change. As he's mentioning over here, one could become Siddhi Lobi, or one could exhibit diplomatic or crooked behavior. So all these things could happen if one is committing offenses along with chanting Hare Krishna. So therefore, one has to be extremely alert, as Prabhupada is writing, to see that the weeds are not growing. Otherwise, after some time, the weeds will choke the Bhakti Lata, and then it'll be very difficult to practice because the taste goes away. Srila Prabhupada, next please, in this purport 2.2.12, has elaborately described both gross and subtle sex. So I'll read a few important statements from here. The grossest type of anartha which binds the conditioned soul in material existence is sex desire. And this sex desire gradually develops in the union of the male and the female. And then Prabhupada is describing about that. Further down, Prabhupada is writing, the conditioned soul is encircled by such products of sex desire, and therefore Bhakti Yoga leads to gradual evaporation of sex desire, which is summarized in 3 headings, namely profit, adoration, and distinction. Okay, so here he's saying that the sex desire is summarized under these 3 headings, puja, la, pratishtha. All conditioned souls are mad after these different forms of sex desire, and one shall see for himself how much he has been freed from such material hankerings based primarily on a sex desire. That means basically the desire to enjoy, then all these various corollaries of the sex desire manifest. As a person feels his hunger satisfied after eating each morsel of foodstuff, he must similarly be able to see the degree to which he has been freed from sex desire. So how much one is progressing can be seen by how much one is freed from the sex desire, both gross and subtle. Sex desire in its various forms is diminished by the process of Bhakti Yoga, because Bhakti Yoga automatically, by the grace of the Lord, effectively results in knowledge and renunciation, even if the devotee is not materially very well educated. Knowledge means knowing things as they are, and if by deliberation it is found that there are things which are at all unnecessary, naturally the person who has acquired knowledge leaves aside such unwanted things. So that's the vairagya which develops. Further down, Prabhupada says, one who has sex desires still with him should not at all try to accept the renounced order of life. For one who has not attained to this stage, there is no question of a renounced order of life. So by the gradual process of devotional service under the guidance of a proper spiritual master and following the principles of the Bhagavatam, one must be able at least to control the gross sex desire before one accepts the renounced order of life factually. Of course, this is referring to sannyas. Okay. And then he speaks about how one should not jump to the 10th canto without being free from the sex desire. A few points on this pratishtha asha. Please go ahead. Go ahead. Okay. So Gaur Govind Swami, in one of his books, he writes some important points regarding this pratishtha asha. Okay, please read.
In the Hari Bhakti Vilas, Srila Sanatan Goswami has said, one may give up Kanaka and Kamini, gold and woman, but it is very difficult to give up this pratishtha. Sanatan Goswami says, Vaishno pratishtha, Shukrera Vishta. Pratishtha, it is the stool of a hog. He has given up everything, his family, his home, all his material relationships, given up money, given up his wife, woman, but he has not given up this pratishtha. This pratishtha,
Vishta,
the stool, the Mahajanas, the Vaishnava Acharyas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Raghunath Das Goswami, Sanatan Das Goswami have said, it is the stool of the hog. Stool is an unnecessary thing. It should be rejected. Nobody accepts stool. It is rejected stuff, very bad, impure. But those who are hogs and dogs, they accept this stool. They think this is very nice and it is to be accepted. Those who are so-called renunciate have given up everything. They say, Artham Anartham Bhavaya Nityam. This money, Artha, is the cause of all Anartha. So we have given it up. They say that they have given up everything, their wife, their son, their family, relatives, but they have not given up this pride that I have given up everything. Such pride is there in this world. You will find beginning from a boy to an old man, that all are running after this pratishtha, name, fame, prestige.
Continue, please.
Therefore, Sanatan Goswami has said, one may give up Kanaka and Kamini, one may give up everything, but it is very difficult to give up Pratishtha Vishta.
It's
Only
small,
for
huh? The font is a little small, I think. Huh?
only for this a man becomes crooked, intolerant, and envious. In this material platform, it is quite natural that one becomes envious. Oh, he's making advancement, he's becoming more wealthy than me, he's occupying a greater position than me. So man becomes envious, and a plan is made to pull him down in the political field. Political enviousness is there. Political murder is there. This is enviousness. It is all crookedness. You will find in this Sadhu Samaj also that if someone is making some nice advancement on the spiritual path, then one who is the real Sadhu will say, yes, he is making some nice advancement. But one who is not a real Sadhu, who is a crooked person, just posing himself as a Vaishnava Sadhu, cannot tolerate it. He becomes intolerable when he hears this, as if a sharp arrow has pierced into his heart. When he hears that, oh, such and such is making advancement, it is very difficult to hear and tolerate it. It is intolerable. But this is not all appreciated. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Nirmatsaranam Satam. Vedyam. Dharma projita kaitavotra paramatru nistaram
Nirmatsaranam Satam
Vedyam vastavastu atra
Travastu Shivadam Tapatrayon Mulmanam.
Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavad Puran propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality, distinguished from the illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. That Vaishnava Bhakta who is not envious can understand this Bhagavad Tattva. One who is envious, though he has come to society of Vaishnavas and follows the path of Vaishnavas, cannot understand this Tattva. Parama Nirmatsaranam Satam Vedyam, and cannot make any advancement on the spiritual path. If a real sadhu and Vaishnava sees or hears that such and such bhakta, devotee is making advancement, then he becomes joyful. Yes, he is making advancement. He becomes joyful. But if instead of becoming joyful, he becomes envious, and it becomes very intolerable on his part to hear such things, then this is kapatya,
Crookedness. Okay. Next.
This Manashiksha is saying to the stupid mind, "O mind, stupid mind, you listen to me, my confidential instruction. Pratishtha drishta sopacha ramani me hridi natet, katham sadhu prema sparshati suchir etat nanu manaha." If you run after this pratishtha, this is vishtha, the stool of a hog, and a shameless chandalini. As long as this shameless chandalini is dancing in your heart, you cannot tread this path of devotional service at all. This kapatya is the paramour of pratishtha. As long as this desire for pratishtha is there in your heart, you cannot give up kapatya, because kapatya is its paramour. That is said, you cannot be freed from this kapatya at all, as long as this pratishtha is there. Pratishtha is a shameless chandalini. Therefore, the instruction is that one who is very serious and eager to achieve this ultimate goal, the supreme goal of human life, this Krishna Prem, should immediately give up this kapatya, crookedness.
Next.
How can you give it up? You should humbly surrender, unconditionally surrender unto the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga. One who is very dear to Guru and Gauranga immediately surrenders with a simple heart. Surrender unto the Vaishnava Sadhu and serve him, please him. So by his mercy, you will be freed from this shameless Chandalini and Kapatya. Otherwise, you cannot free yourself from this. Bhaktivinoda Thakur cries and says, when will that day come that I will be freed from all these things and get Radha Krishna Premadhana? So those who are speculators, crooked persons, kapati, they only speculate. They will not accept things as it is. They never accept the essence, sara. They accept vastu as avastu and avastu as vastu, sat as asat and asat as sat, real as unreal and unreal as real. Therefore, Sadhu, Guru and Mahajanas have said that one who is very serious, very eager to achieve perfection in his human birth, which is Krishna Bhakti, to get Krishna should be very simple. He should cultivate simplicity. Simplicity is Vaishnavism. Those who are real sadhus, Vaishnavas are simple by nature. They are not crooked at all. This crookedness, kapatya, is a great hindrance on this path of perfection. This is a sort of disease.
Patitya and
kapatya. One who is a crooked person who has developed crookedness even becomes envious towards the doctor who has come to cure him. He becomes envious of a doctor, so his disease is incurable.
So we put this subject matter at the beginning because this was one of the problems with Dhruva Maharaj, that he had this great desire for a great kingdom, for pratishtha. This was his contamination, as a result of which later on in the pastime we see that Dhruva Maharaj greatly lamented for this contamination in his practice of devotional service. And so therefore here we find that how the acharyas are very heavy about this desire for pratishtha, which is compared to subtle sex life. And one can give it up by unconditional surrender to the lotus feet of Guru and Gauranga with a simple heart. One simply agrees to practice pure devotional service without any other motivation. So if one has the desire for pratishtha, the paramour is kapatya. Because somehow to get the pratishtha, one will engage in so many different crooked ways and means, somehow to get the pratishtha. So therefore, this kapatya and pratishtha go together. And these pose great impediments in the life of sadhus, in the life of transcendentalists, Vaishnavas who are trying to progress on the path of devotional service. And so therefore, one has to be careful. Otherwise, all these various symptoms of adharma that have been listed will manifest in our practices of devotional service. Therefore, we thought of putting up this discussion right at the beginning. And later on, we will find Srila Prabhupada in his purports also mentions that even though Dhruva Maharaj, he had a desire, he had a big desire, he had a desire for wealth, for pratishtha, he had all this desire, but at least he did not adopt dishonest means to get it. At least he approached the Supreme Lord, he approached Guru, and by honest means, he tried to achieve it. So otherwise, one can get into all these very complicated things which pose obstacles on the path of devotional service. Any questions so far? After every section, we'll take questions. You can go to the next one. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, sometimes, like no, as a being institution, we sometimes appreciate the material endeavors, like instead of like no, the focus of devotional service changes. So how do we understand this? What should be our focus during such situations? Like no, sometimes some devotee comes to Krishna consciousness, we just highlight his whatever material endeavor he's doing, and then that way, like no, the institution states an example that material things are appreciated more.
So what do you mean by saying the material endeavors are appreciated? What is your meaning?
Like the that person's material opulences are appreciated more. skills, and they're like given more focus.
Okay, he said what he has to say. Okay, so the point is, okay, one has some opulence, that is fine. Prabhupada gave the simple example. All these material opulences are zeros. But if one is added, then it has so much value. So the person may have all these opulences, but now he is using them in Krishna service. Therefore, they're of value. And therefore, appreciating them is not a problem. But if, so from an institutional perspective, it is correct. The person is using the opulence in Krishna service. So many people have opulence. How many are using in Krishna service? But the person has agreed to use his opulence in Krishna service. So it's worth appreciating, isn't it? So whatever opulence one may have big opulence, one may have small opulence, but as long as it is used in Krishna service, it is perfect. And so, of course, somebody who may have big opulence may be appreciated, and those who have small opulence may not be so much appreciated. But then, because we have some limitations in appreciating everyone, if everyone has to be appreciated, how much time will go in appreciation? So therefore, we can definitely appreciate on a smaller level. And also, whether one receives appreciation or not, Krishna knows everything. And when Krishna is satisfied by one's devotional service, then Krishna gives the satisfaction. Krishna gives the inspiration to go on in the practice of devotional service. So therefore, in either case, it is all perfect. Does it help? Somebody like to add something to this? Another question?
So again, the same thing when it comes to the institutional level, we say that we have to follow and we have to respect our spiritual master, and a spiritual master says that follow your authorities, and authorities may say you have to do like this. So in that sense, again, the themes comes up. Now Krishna knows everything, that we know that, but Krishna never speaks with us. He never speaks to us. He never corrected us. We said that Krishna corrects through the Vaishnavas only. So again, when that situation comes up, how to balance that exactly?
Balance what?
The same question, like when it comes to the pratishtha, when it's the appreciation, when it's to taking sides, and whatever it means. Because we know that Krishna, sometimes we may say that Krishna is observing. So it's wrong from my side. It's like we say, it's easier said than done. So we say that, okay, yes, you can cool down sometimes. So that time we say that Krishna is there. But again, sometimes we say that we should not displease the Vaishnava. Because Krishna says that, okay, I'm in the heart of a Vaishnava.
Yes. Yes. So we try to serve according to our best capacity. And then if we are sincere, then Krishna will be pleased, and Krishna's pleasure will also be manifested through the Vaishnavas. The Vaishnavas will also be pleased because Krishna is there within the heart of the Vaishnavas. Krishna is there within our heart. Krishna knows our sincerity. So then Krishna can give the satisfaction to the Vaishnavas. And whether it may be openly expressed or not in public, whether that is expressed or not, but still, the most important thing is if Krishna is satisfied. Prahlad Maharaj gives the example that just like if you decorate the face, the reflection in the mirror will automatically be decorated. So if Krishna is pleased by our service, then the Atma, which is like a reflection, part and parcel, will also be satisfied. And that satisfaction will result, as the example we just saw, that's given in the 11th canto, Tushti, Pushti, Kshudapaya, which is Bhakti, Pareshanubho, Virakti. So when the satisfaction satisfaction is there in the heart due to the practice of devotional service, automatically there's virakti. And when there is virakti, then the desire for gross sex and subtle sex, both will evaporate. And that is the symptom of one's own progress. And that is what is ultimately what is required to become detached from all these material desires and to develop a taste for Krishna consciousness. And so whether things are publicly appreciated or not, the result of the practice of the devotional service can be manifest and felt within one's own heart. So what is more important? The public appreciation and all the grandeur, that is what we want? Or do we want to please Krishna and feel Krishna's satisfaction within one's own heart? What do we want? Choice is ours.
Guruji, can you please repeat that? How did you connect this kapata and simplicity with Dhruva Maharaj section? Can you please repeat it once briefly?
The Dhruva Maharaj's main anartha was his desire for wealth, pratishtha, isn't it? That was his desire. That's the connection. Okay, let's proceed. Any addition? We have what to do. We're in the material world, which is conspicuous by the presence of time. So maybe some of the questions will get answered as we proceed in our discussions. And if they don't, then you can raise up the questions at a certain point. All right. And if they still don't get answered, then we can always have time for some personal, private interactions and discussions. Okay. Okay. So we're going to the next section. Suruchi chastises Dhruva. Let's get into the pastime now. 6th verse. Let's recite. Atata kiryate vamsham, athato kiryate vamsham, punya kirte kurudvaha, swayambhuvasyapi manor harer amsham shajanmanaha.
Maitreya continued, O best of the Kuru dynasty, I shall now describe before you the descendants of Swayambhuva Manu, who was born of a part of a plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Please read the next translation also.
Swayambhuva Manu had 2 sons by his wife Shatarupa, and the names of the sons were Uttanapad and Priyavrata. Because both of them were descendants of a plenary expansion of Vasudeva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were very competent to rule the universe, to maintain and protect the citizens.
Okay, go ahead. Next translation, please.
King Uttanapad had 2 queens named Suniti and Suruchi. Suruchi was much more dear to the king. Suniti, who had a son named Dhruva, was not his favorite.
Srila Prabhupada in the purport describes why Maitreya Rishi has begun to describe about the descendants of Uttanapad and especially Dhruva Maharaj pastime. He didn't immediately go into Priyavrat's pastime, but then he wanted to focus on Uttanapad's pastime because Prabhupada writes in the purport, the instance in the life of Dhruva Maharaj are very attractive for devotees. Why they're attractive? From his pious actions, one can learn how one can detach himself from material possessions and how one can enhance one's devotional service by severe austerities and penances. By hearing the activities of pious Dhruva, one can enhance one's faith in God and can directly connect with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And thus one can very soon be elevated to the transcendental platform of devotional service. The example of Dhruva Maharaj's austerities can immediately generate a feeling of devotional service in the hearts of the hearers. So one can be inspired in one's devotional service by the wonderful example of Dhruva Maharaj. And that's the reason why Maitreya Rishi begins to describe about Dhruva Maharaj. Text 9 translation, please.
Once upon a time, King Uttanapad was patting the son of Suruchi, Uttama, placing him on his lap. Dhruva Maharaj was also trying to get on the king's lap, but the king did not very much welcome him.
Text 10. Tata Tata chikirshamanam tam sapatnyastanayam dhruvam suruchi shrunvato ragnya seshrasham ahati garvita.
While the child, Dhruva Maharaj, was trying to get on the lap of his father, Suruchi, his stepmother, became very envious of the child, and with great pride, she began to speak so as to be heard by the king himself.
Yes, so here, Sa Idsham and Ati Garvita. So because of the envy, Idsha, so she could not tolerate, Suruchi could not tolerate how her stepson is trying to get on the lap of the king. And so she had the pride, Garva, she had the Garva, the pride that I am the favorite queen of the king. And how can this fellow get on the lap of the king? So this is the result of Idsha. So we were discussing, so all these are connected. When there is the desire for, basically it all arises from the basic root desire, that is kama, sex, tendency to enjoy. So when that tendency is there, one cannot tolerate somebody else trying to enjoy. One just cannot tolerate. As soon as one sees that anybody else is trying to enjoy, or anybody in connection to somebody else is trying to enjoy, immediately there's Irsha. Why? Because there is Garva. One thinks, I am the special one. Why somebody else can enjoy? And so Suruchi is exhibiting this. Prabhupada writes in the purport, but because of his favoritism towards his queen Suruchi, he could not welcome Dhruva Maharaj despite his feelings. So here we see that King Uttanapad, even though he had affectionate feelings towards Dhruva, but because Suruchi was his favorite, therefore he could not express those feelings, and rather he did not respond. So this favoritism, being partial, that also causes problems. So therefore, the quality that is very important for Vaishnavas is being impartial, not showing partiality, taking sides. That is described as one of the qualities of Prithu Maharaj. So it is described that Prithu Maharaj was totally impartial in his regime, in his rule. And so it's described that even if his own son would commit some mistake, he would be ready to punish. But if the son of his enemy would not commit a mistake, then he would not take any action. So he was totally impartial. So this is another important quality. Otherwise, here we see, just because of this favoritism, the whole pastime took place. Because of the favoritism of King Uttanapad towards one queen, Suruchi. So we find the whole pastime proceeded because of this. And so therefore, having this impartial attitude is important. You're raising your hand? Or? So what we'll take questions at the end of one section. Okay? This is material world, what to do. Whether it is, as long as one has material tendencies, problems will be there. So Prabhupada writes, if a woman understands that her husband regards her as a favorite and is especially affectionate to her, she takes undue advantage. These symptoms are visible even in such an elevated society as the family of Swayambhu Manu. Then what to speak of any other society? Therefore, it is concluded that the feminine nature of woman is present everywhere. Text 11. Queen Suruchi told Dhruva Maharaj. Please read.
Queen Suruchi told Dhruva Maharaj, my dear child, you do not deserve to sit on the throne or on the lap of the king. Surely you are also the son of the king, but because you did not take your birth from my womb, you are not qualified to sit on your father's lap.
Here again, Srila Prabhupada speaks about the pride of Suruchi, that I am so special. She's thinking, I am so special. So if you want to sit on the lap of your father, you have to take birth from my womb. I am so special. So this is the anartha of distinction, pratishtha. Puja, la, pratishtha. Puja means one has a desire for worship. Labh means a desire for material possessions. Pratishta means distinction specifically. So one thinks I am special amongst all others. I'm very special. So she's proud that she is special amongst the queens of the king. And therefore that pride is being exhibited through these words. Okay, please read the next translation, text 12.
My dear child, you are unaware that you were born not of my womb, but of another woman. Therefore, you should know that your attempt is doomed to failure. You are trying to fulfill a desire which is impossible to fulfill.
So again, Prabhupada writes in the last line of the purport, this is another statement of Queen Suruchi's pride. So practically in all these purports, Prabhupada is pointing out to the pride of Suruchi. So what is the cause of pride? What is the root cause of pride? Bodily attachments, okay. Yes, ignorance of what? Yes. Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita, Nirmana Moha Jitasanga Dosha. In that purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that the cause of pride is moha. So even though one is so insignificant, one is an insignificant spirit soul, one's body can be destroyed at any point of time, but still one thinks, I'm very special. But what is our significance? At any point of time, any moment, one can be finished. But because of the moha, thinking, because of misidentification with the body, thinking I'm special, I'm this, I'm that, that is the root cause of pride. Prabhupada, in one lecture, Prabhupada says, just like the dog is also thinking, I'm dog, I can bark. I'm so special. So that is the cause. The main cause of pride is bodily misidentification, ignorance of one's real self. So in this way, Suruchi is exhibiting this pride. And so therefore, in the next verse, she says, text 13, translation, please.
If you at all desire to rise to the throne of the king, then you have to undergo severe austerities. First of all, you must satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan. And then, when you are favored by him, because of such worship, you shall have to take your next birth from my womb.
So Prabhupada says, Suruchi was so envious of Dhruva Maharaj that she indirectly asked him to change his body. So she's telling him, now you have to change your body, give up your body, get another body. Then only you can be fortunate to get onto the lap of your father. So in this way, Suruchi exhibited her pride and envy. Questions? Yes, bro.
Sometimes whenever we are there in a managerial post, we tend to do some mistakes, like Uttanapad. Sometimes we are in the seeking post from the management. We feel that we are Dhruva. Sometimes there's like this five positions are there. We are also doing that. There's like whenever we are not doing a management and just like the things are not happening as per our the way, then we feel that it is like I am a Dhruva there. And sometimes it is happening, then we are not clearly understanding that I am now Uttam. And Uttanapad also we are playing the role of Sunitis. Sometimes we fail to do that, but like whenever we are doing a counselor role, that time we always say that Suniti is the thing we always tell to our counselors. And the Suruchi's role also we are doing, but we are not knowing that many times. So how we can like this is like happening in everyone's life. So how we can balance that? These two roles we are playing, but we are not knowing. And the two roles, we always say that it is misjudgment by the management and how to not cry out loudly.
Balance, the golden word, is always very difficult, not so easy. as we have just been discussing, what is very important is, as Prabhupada writes, one must be very alert to distinguish one's own anarthas. And so therefore, it may be very easy to find faults with others and to blame others. All that may be easy. But then what is difficult is to introspect one's own heart and try to find out what is the root cause of the problem. We are actually going to get into this discussion very soon, as we will see in the teachings of Suniti as well as Narad Muni. So just hold on for a little more time and we will get into a more detailed discussion on your question, if you don't mind. Okay, thank you. Any other question?
Hare Krishna.
Online, somebody is there? Okay, let him ask.
Hare Krishna, Guruji. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we are able to hear.
Guruji, regarding this favoritism, so sometimes it is seen even in like a Krishna conscious society, like if the leaders they are showing some favoritism, obviously not exactly like or kind of reservation for like those who are in minority, like or like generally we are saying that this guru groupism is not good. But then if we see that this is happening by the leaders, like, so how much is this correct? And they are not doing for their own guru, but doing for other gurus because they are in minor. So how much it is shastric or how much it is allowed or justified?
So your question is, how much is favoritism allowed?
Like, yeah, because here we see it's Suruchi is doing favoritism for someone who is his part, like her own son. But generally, sometimes it is seen and it is done to someone is doing it is a leader doing favor, like doing some reservation kind of thing.
Okay, you're saying
Or
that sometimes
other, like kind of guru groupism, but it is not like his own guru. He's doing it for others because they are in less number or some reasons like that. So how much is it valid?
Okay, so your question is that sometimes leaders may show favoritism, groupism, and all that. How much is it valid? Is that your question?
No, like, but this is a different kind of groupism because it is not like someone showing to his own, like someone not to his own, someone related to his own guru or someone his own, but just because someone is in, like, just like in India, we see that there is so much of reservation or for the minorities, something like that. Similar thing when happens kind of here. So how
everything has to be seen from the viewpoint of Shastra, Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. And
yeah,
so ultimately, it is the responsibility of every individual to mold one's life in such a way that it is in accordance to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. So otherwise, whoever it may be a leader, subordinate, this one, that one, whoever it may be, if life is not according to Shastra, ya Shastra vidam utsrujya vartate kamakarata nasasiddhimavapnoti na sukham na paramgatim. These will be the results of one not following Shastra. So therefore, it is not that we take shelter of someone who is not following and say that, okay, somebody else is not following, so I will also not follow. So that is simply an excuse. If I need to make progress, then I have to mold my life according to Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. That is my responsibility. I cannot just take shelter or take it as an excuse that somebody senior or somebody else is not following. Therefore, I also will not follow. If I follow, I get the benefit. If I don't follow, then I will have to face the consequences. That is the simple truth what the Shastra is saying.
Yeah, so, but is this the kind of groupism and showing? Is it shastric?
Okay, it's not so clear. Maybe we can discuss personally later on. All right.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Krishna.
It is from previous section which we were discussing. Can I ask now?
Okay.
So you're telling about that means section of Pratishtha. So sometimes means that doubt is there that basically Like initially, like you were telling that such type of desires are not there, but then such weeds grow up with time while we are pouring the water of Shravan and Kirtan. So one thing I wanted to ask is that, is it because sometimes those people hear from people who are affected by these things? Means what is the consequence of hearing from a person who is affected by these things? That is one part. And how does it come? It starts up. So these two are the questions.
Okay. So as yes, Sangha, association definitely plays a very important role. And when we associate with, especially by hearing, when we associate with people who have various anarthas, we associate with them, we see their example, then definitely we'll be affected by that. So association definitely plays a very important role. And therefore we find Rupa Goswami in the Nectar of Instruction in 2 verses is speaking about the important point of association. And so therefore that definitely plays a very important role. How does it all begin? There could be various causes, various reasons for it. One of the main reasons could be that, as we just read Srila Prabhupada's purport, and that is chanting Hare Krishna, hearing and chanting with offenses. So when one commits offenses while one is practicing hearing and chanting, then that leads to the growth of the weeds. And then if one is not alert enough to distinguish them and uproot them at the right time, then we keep watering the weeds and then the weeds continue to grow. And it becomes very difficult when the weeds grow even more, then it becomes very difficult to identify them and very difficult to uproot them also. The more the weeds grow, more difficult to uproot. Therefore, one has to be always very alert. And for oneself to be alert may be difficult. Or in other words, sometimes one is so covered by the lower modes that one cannot distinguish. Srila Prabhupada gives the example, if I'm wearing yellow colored glasses, I see everything yellow. And even if somebody says, no, this is not yellow, this is white, I will say, no, it is yellow only. So it's very difficult. Therefore, having faith in someone who is not so influenced. So somebody is seeing reality. He says, no, it is white. I have faith in him. Then I will accept. If I don't have faith in anyone, then I continue to see things yellow. And I think I'm right. Correct. Therefore, you can read the purport to Bhagavad Gita 14 chapter, verse number 19, where Srila Prabhupada explains very beautifully how in order to get free from the influence of the modes, taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master of a Vaishnava and having faith in him and following his instructions is very, very important. Because without that, it becomes very difficult to distinguish one's own anarthas, one's own weeds. It is very difficult. So therefore, one requires help of someone. It is said that even a doctor, when he is diseased, he has to go to another doctor because it's very difficult to identify one's own disease. All right. Is it okay? Okay, fine. Thank you. So we go to the next section. Suniti pacifies Dhruva. Text 14. Please read the translation.
My dear Vidura, as a snake, when struck by a stick, breathes very heavily. Dhruva Maharaj, having been struck by the strong words of his stepmother, began to breathe very heavily because of great anger. When he saw that his father was silent and did not protest, he immediately left the palace and went to his mother.
Okay, so here we find that Dhruva Maharaj became very angry, especially because his father was silent and he did not protest. So therefore, for a responsible person, when he sees something wrong happening and he does not do anything, then he also becomes incriminated in the crime. So therefore, it is very important that one who's in a responsible position, he needs to do the needful. Therefore, Lord Rishabhdev in his teachings to his sons, he says that when it is the duty of one in responsible position to continue to give instructions, even though the subordinate, even though the follower may not follow them, but it is the duty of the responsible person to continue to give instructions without getting angry, because that is the responsibility. We see the famous example of Devanand Pandit. So Devanand Pandit, when Srivas Thakur came to the the Bhagavad class, and Srivas Thakur exhibited symptoms of ecstasy, he fell down, then what did the disciples do? They picked him up and threw him on the road. And what did Devanand Pandit do? He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. But that was his. So there are acts of commission and there are acts of omission. Both are guilty. So one can do a wrong act. Those are acts of commission, or acts of omission means one does not do anything what one is supposed to do. So here in this case we find Devanand Pandit. He is a responsible person. His disciples are acting in a wrong way. He didn't do anything about it. And because he did not do anything about it, that's the reason we find that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so angry with him. So therefore, here we find Dhruva Maharaj became extremely upset. Okay, Suruchi, she is stepmother, she said something. But what was more upsetting was, here is my father who is supposed to show love and affection towards me, and he is also not saying anything. That means he's supporting her. So that made him very upset. Okay. So then, text 15, translation, please.
When Dhruva Maharaj reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger, and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while the palace residents who had heard of all the harsh words of Suruchi related everything in detail. Thus Suniti also became greatly aggrieved.
Read the next one also.
This incident was unbearable to Suniti's patience. She began to burn as if in a forest fire, and in her grief she became just like a burnt leaf and so lamented. She remembered as the words of her co-wife, her bright lotus-like face filled with tears, and thus she spoke.
Okay, so from the next verse are the wonderful instructions which Suniti gives to Dhruva Maharaj. Dirgam shvasanti vrijinasya param apashyati balakam mahabala mamangalam tata pareshu mamstha bhungte janoyat paradukkadasta. Translation.
She also was breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain."
Okay, so that was the first instruction she gave. Do not find faults with others. Do not wish ill for others. Because whatever pain one is getting in this life, it is only because of actions performed in previous life. That is the first instruction she gives. Then, okay, read the next verse translation.
Suniti said, "My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so, because the king your father does not consider me his wife or even his maid servant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore, it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, you have grown up."
One more, please.
My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your step-brother Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshipping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
So here we find that Suniti immediately accepted that what Suruchi has said is correct. So Suniti did not exhibit envy or pride. She was humble enough to accept that what Suruchi said is correct. And so we find that how Suniti is exhibiting these wonderful qualities. Srila Prabhupada writes in this purport, unless one is favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one cannot achieve any success in life. Man proposes, God disposes. The last line of the purport, indirectly, the words of Suruchi were a benediction for Dhruva Maharaj, for because of the influence of his stepmother's words, he became a great devotee. So even though Suruchi, she spoke harshly, but still Those words had meaning, and that actually became a benediction for Dhruva Maharaj. So here we find curse becomes a blessing. So can you give some other examples from the scriptures of how a curse turns out to be a benediction? Okay, let's hear one by one. Yes, Manmohan Shampoo. What happened? Okay, fine. So he got a curse, they got cursed, but they became trees in Nand Maharaj's court here. So that was a curse. So how it became benediction? Okay, so therefore Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken. Yes, Sudhanath Prabhu?
Maharaj was cursed to become an elephant next life and got liberated.
Okay, fine. What else? Yes, Sundar Prabhu? Right. Thank you. Yes, Ramsek Prabhu?
Got cursed.
Uh-huh.
Later on, she was delivered by the Lord himself.
Okay, that turned out benediction good. What else? Yes, Chitraketu Maharaj got cursed. How it became benediction? Okay, it became Vritrasura, and that hastened his going back to Godhead. Some other examples?
Urvashi cursing Arjuna.
Urvashi cursing Arjuna. How was it a benediction?
During the Adhyatwas.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Some other examples? Okay, yes, Raghav. How is it benediction? Okay, therefore he could travel and preach. Yes, that's right. Prabhupada said he also...
Vidurji was thrown out of the palace, but that became a benediction. He could hear Krishna Katha and associate with the great devotees.
Vidura. Okay, Vidura, he was driven out by Duryodhana. Okay, fine. That turned out to be a benediction. Ramsek Guru?
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu got cursed by that Brahmana. He will not be able to enjoy material life.
Then what happened?
He took sannyas.
He took sannyas, and because of that we are here. Okay, fine. Yes. What else? I'm looking, there's one more very prominent example. Of course, it comes later on in the 4th canto.
Narad Muni got cursed.
That is told. That is told. Anga getting Anga, he got a son like Vena. And as a result, what happened? Yes, Anga left home. He became detached and he perfected his life. So he could later on. Initially, he was depressed that he got such a mischievous son, but later on he could understand that actually it was a benediction. So we find that in this way, curses could turn out to be benedictions, because ultimately everything happens according to the plan of the Lord very perfectly. But what is very important is for us to see the curse in the right perspective, and for that the association of devotees is required. Because in the association of devotees, then that will help us to see the curse, to see the misfortunes in the right perspective. So here we find Suniti, she could see that, okay, Suruchi, she has spoken some harsh words, but those are correct. And that turned out to be a benediction for Dhruva Maharaj. Okay, text 20. Yasyang Ripadmam Paricharya Vishwa Vibhavanayata guna bipatte ajodhyatishtat khalu parmeshtyam padam jitatma shvasana bivandyam. Translation.
Suniti continued, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshipping his lotus feet, your great-grandfather, Lord Brahma, acquired the necessary qualifications to create this universe. Although he is unborn and is the chief of all living creatures, he is situated in that exalted post because of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom even great yogis worship by controlling the mind and regulating the life air, prana.
Okay, so Suniti is glorifying that, yes, Suruchi told him to take shelter of the Supreme Lord. And what is the result of taking shelter of the Supreme Lord? Even great people like Brahma and Manu, they acquired great qualifications by worshipping the Supreme Lord. An important sentence from Srila Prabhupada's purport. To become successful in any attempt, one not only has to undergo severe penances and austerities, but also must be dependent on the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these two factors are always important, and that is one's own efforts, one's own austerities, penances, that is definitely important, but that must attract the mercy of the Lord. Dharma svanashtitasya pumsa vishwastena kadasuya na utpadyed yati ratim shrama eva hi kevalam. So ultimately, whatever dharma, whatever activities we are performing, whatever austerities, penances, so many things we may be doing, but if that does not attract the mercy of the Lord, by which the rati, the attraction towards the Lord, increases, if that does not happen, then everything is simply a waste. So therefore, our barometer of success is whether the rati is increasing, whether the taste in Krishna consciousness is increasing or not. That is the barometer. Otherwise, so many activities we may be performing, but if the rati is not increasing, the taste is not increasing in our practice of devotional service, if we are still thinking that, oh, another Bhagavatam class, how many classes, same thing. So if when the taste is not increasing, then that means there is some problem in our practices. In that connection, in some previous discussion, we did quote this well-known verse, 4th canto, 30th chapter, verse number 20, where Srila Prabhupada, the verse itself and the purport is explaining that how on the path of Krishna consciousness, nothing can be stereotyped or boring, because Krishna is always Nava Yovanam. Everything is always ever fresh. Things can never be boring. But they become boring because Krishna doesn't give that inspiration, or rather Krishna gives inspiration so that everything appears ever fresh. But when Krishna gives inspiration, okay, when we follow, yes, two important qualities Prabhupada repeats. Yes, sincere and serious. When these two qualities are there, then dadami buddhi yogam tam, then Krishna gives the inspiration. And Prabhupada writes in that purport, when Krishna as the super soul gives inspiration, then nothing becomes stereotyped or hackneyed. Then everything is ever fresh. Then as Rupa Goswami, the same 2 words or 3 words, Hare, Krishna, Rama, or not even 3 words, just 1 word, Krishna, no, not in 1 word, just 1 syllable, produces so much of ecstasy. The same syllables, Krishna, but so much of ecstasy. Why? Because, of course, he's on the highest platform of love. But when the sincerity and seriousness is there, then Krishna inspires. Krishna inspires. And when Krishna inspires, nothing is boring, nothing is hackneyed. And therefore, the devotee always remains enthusiastic. So yes, so we have to put our efforts, and that attracts Krishna's mercy. And then one can achieve great things. 4:30:20. Okay, text 21. Tata manorvo bhagavan pitamaho yam ekamatya purudakshiner makhe ishtva bipede duravapam anyato bhaumam sukham divyamathapavaryam.
Suniti informed her son, your grandfather Swambhu Manu executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby, with unflinching faith and devotion, he worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success in material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation, which is impossible to obtain by worshipping the demigods.
Yes. So in this way, we find Suniti is saying that this is the greatness of worshipping the Supreme Lord. Therefore, one should worship the Supreme Lord for success and not worship the demigods. Prabhupada writes, the success of one's life is measured by one's material happiness in this life and liberation in the next. Looks a little surprising, isn't it? Somebody would like to give a purport on this statement? This is the barometer for success, Prabhupada is writing. How much one is materially happy in this life. Okay, liberation next, that we can understand. But success is how much material happiness in this life. Okay, Ragharu?
It's like when somebody sincerely practices Krishna consciousness, then he won't experience the three tap and sinful reactions goes up. So that way. So even though the upheavals may be there and the modes may be there, but he transcends. So that way he finds being aloof to the entire that distressful situation.
Okay.
That way he becomes like happy and satisfied materially.
So, but material world means always Trivit Tap will always be the devotee, non-devotee.
Yeah, so he doesn't get affected that way. He remains materially satisfied. Like satisfaction also we say that way, that it's not about how much person gets or doesn't get. It's internal state of consciousness.
Okay, okay. Good point. Somebody would like to add? Yes. Okay, so if one does not get wealth like Dhruva Maharaj, then? So then that means he's not successful. Okay, okay, fine. Okay, Sir Lakshan Prabhu and then Sundarshan.
When one worships the Supreme Lord for material appearances, so during that endeavor, he will go through the purification. So by that purification, at the end of life, he will get liberation also.
But what about during life?
During life also, he may get, but the material opulence devotees may or may not get, but the satisfaction will be there for when he performs that material effort, and at that time he may utilize that material activity for the pleasure of the Lord. That by the pleasure of the Lord, he will get the satisfaction internally by the mercy of the Lord.
Okay, okay, good points. Thank you. Okay, we'll hear from Gauram Prabhu and then come back. Yes, go ahead. Whatever is needed, Krishna will give. That is promised by the Lord. Correct. But what can you say? Krishna, you have said in Gita, you have to give.
Of Tukaram Maharaj and Narasimha Mehta.
So what if Krishna does not give? Then the devotee is not successful.
Devotee is self-satisfied. Like
that is another part of the story. But my question is, so suppose Krishna does not give whatever the devotee wants. So maybe you want a car for your department, no? And Krishna does not give, then what? Then you're successful or not successful?
Krishna knows if it's needed, then he will give. If it's not needed, then he will not give. Krishna knows.
Yes, Sundarshan, some concluding thoughts?
The greatest wealth materially is satisfaction, as Lord Vamandev says. It is not how much you possess, whether you are satisfied with whatever you possess or not. Then only you can focus your attention on getting liberated, and that's how he can next attain liberation. Otherwise, there are so many people who are very rich, but they are not satisfied. So they have so many things physically, but mentally they are not satisfied. That's why they keep endeavoring in that direction of getting more and more, and they become more frustrated. Whereas a devotee like Sudama Brahman was very satisfied, and that's how he could focus on bhakti, etc., and then can get liberation also.
Another famous example in Mahaprabhu's pastime?
Sridhar
Kolavecha. Yes. Correct. Yes, that's right. Yes, so the happiness doesn't come from the wealth. The happiness comes from the satisfaction which one derives when one is in connection with the Supreme. Such success can be achieved only by the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And for that, what is required? Ekamatya. Yam ekamatya. Prabhupada is focusing on that word, ekamatya, concentrating one's mind on the Lord without deviation. In the word-to-word, Prabhupada says, with unflinching devotion or ananya bhakti. Okay, so that is what will result in one becoming totally satisfied and happy, and ultimately one can get liberation. Okay, text 22. Tameva vatsashraya bhritya vatsalam mumukshubir mrigya padabja paddatim ananya bhave nija dharma bhavite manasya vasthapya bhajasva purusham. Translation.
My dear boy, you should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees. Persons seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Becoming purified by executing your allotted occupation, just situate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your heart, and without deviating for a moment, engage always in his service.
Okay, so here again you find, like in the previous verse, the word was used ekamatya. There's a similar word in this verse. What is that? Yes, ananya bhave, ananya bhave, ananya bhakti. So again and again, this is focused that one must perform ananya bhakti without deviation, without contamination. This is what is important in order to please the Lord. In the translation, Prabhupada says, without deviating for a moment, not in for a moment, one should deviate, always engage in his service. Prabhupada writes in the purport, everyone can continue in his constitutional occupational duties and at the same time keep the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart. So Prabhupada quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, Ma manusmara yudhyacha, go on fighting, but keep me within your mind. That should be the motto of every honest person seeking perfection in Krishna consciousness. What should be the motto? Yes, performance duties, remembering Krishna. Remembering Krishna. So it's not simply the external performance of activities, but at the same time, the remembrance of the Lord is also important, because ultimately, subtle creates gross. How we tune the subtle body is going to determine the next gross body. So therefore, if you're simply mechanically performing activities, but the subtle body is not changing, then whatever thoughts are in the subtle body, that will create the next gross body. Therefore, later on, we will find in this 4th canto, in the conversation between Narad Muni and King Prashin Barishat, we'll find an elaborate description Narad Muni is giving, that how focusing on the subtle body and transforming the subtle body is very important. And so therefore, as one progresses in devotional service, it is not only just the mechanical performance of activities, but at the same time, investing one's consciousness in the performance of those activities, that is also very, very important, because that is what is going to determine the next body. And so therefore, we find that in the practices of devotional service, as one is performing the various activities, but at the same time, the consciousness, why am I performing this activity? For whom am I performing? What is the quality of the activity? These also play a very important role. And therefore, we find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu glorifying the devotional service of Raghav Pandit as if he has 5 mouths, because he didn't do something very elaborate. The only thing which he did was he brought some coconuts from a far off place, paying a higher price, but maintaining first-class cleanliness. The consciousness was totally invested in trying to please the Supreme Lord. And because there was that investment of consciousness in the activity, therefore we find Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so pleased. So therefore, it is not the activity per se that is important, but the consciousness which is invested in performing that activity that matters. A person can perform an activity mechanically for the sake of performing. One can simply be present for the Mangalarti, for the class, because one has to, or one can perform the same activity because I want to please Guru and Krishna. That change in consciousness is what is going to change the result. And so therefore, Srila Prabhupada is making this point. That should be the motto of every honest person seeking perfection and Krishna consciousness. And then the other important word is Bhritya Vatsala, which indicates that he's very kind to his devotees. And then Srila Prabhupada is very beautifully explaining here, paraphrasing Suniti's words. She said, you came to me crying, having been insulted by your stepmother, but I'm unable to do any good for you. But Krishna is so kind to his devotees that if you go to him, then the combined kindness of millions of mothers like me will be surpassed by his affectionate and tender dealings. When everyone else fails to mitigate one's misery, Krishna is able to help the devotee. So that is the love which one can feel from Krishna himself, millions of mothers, so much of love one can feel when one has that relationship with Krishna. Ultimately, every living entity in this world is looking for this love. That is what everyone is hankering for. But when that relationship with Krishna is not there, one tries to search for that same love in so many other relationships of this material worlds. And one only experiences so-called love in the form of lust, which never satisfies the soul. So therefore, when one experiences that love from Krishna, by establishing the relationship with Krishna, that leads to total satisfaction for the hankering soul. Therefore, without establishing that relationship with Krishna through, as we have been reading in these verses, through that Ananya Bhakti, if that relationship is not established, then whatever other activities one may do for satisfaction of the soul can never be satisfied. Therefore, that relationship with Krishna is what needs to be thickened and what needs to be made very strong. Then Krishna provides so much love to the soul that the soul experiences full satisfaction. Otherwise, in spite of so many different activities, so many different ways in which one tries to find satisfaction, but the soul will always remain hungry and the soul will always feel lonely because of not having that relationship with Krishna. So therefore, Suniti is advising Dhruva to establish that relationship with Krishna, which totally satisfies the jiva. As Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, as soon as one places the Supreme Personality of Godhead within one's heart, everything becomes easy and successful. One simply has to establish that relationship with Krishna. Then everything becomes easy and successful. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is most difficult will become easy. Without that mercy, whatever is most easy will also become most difficult. But when one has that grace of the Supreme Lord, everything becomes easy and successful, as we find in the life of Srila Prabhupada. Text 23. Nanyam tata padma palashalochanad dukkha chiddham timrigyami kanchana yo mrigyate hasta grihita padmaya shriyetare ranga vimrigyamanaya.
My dear Dhruva, as far as I am concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose eyes are like lotus petals. Many demigods, such as Brahma, seek the pleasure of the goddess of fortune, but goddess of fortune herself, with a lotus flower in her hand, is always ready to render service to the Supreme Lord.
So in these verses, Suniti is glorifying, taking shelter of the Supreme Lord by saying great personalities like Brahma, Swayambhu, Manu, they achieved success by taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the only way to achieve success is by taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. And even the goddess of fortune is always eager to render service to the Lord because she knows that that is the only way one can actually be successful. So Prabhupada writes here, permanent benediction is spiritual benediction, since spirit soul is eternal. That is the ultimate benediction, spiritual benediction. And in the first canto purports, Srila Prabhupada also has written that famous statement, material progress follows spiritual progress, correct? Material well-being, yes, that's right. Material well-being follows spiritual well-being. So therefore, the real benediction is spiritual benediction. Therefore, Suniti told her son that he should not seek the mercy of the demigods, but should directly approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead to mitigate his misery. Even the highly placed demigods worship the goddess of fortune, but the goddess of fortune, Mahalakshmi herself, is always seeking the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Recently in the Bhagavatam classes on the 5th canto, we were hearing how Lakshmi ji herself is praying to the Lord. I think Sundar Shampur, you gave a class on one of those verses where Lakshmi ji is saying that all these men who are, all these ladies who are seeking some other men as their husband, they are simply wasting their time. So therefore we see Lakshmi ji, she is also glorifying and taking shelter of the Supreme Lord. Anyone therefore who takes to the worship of the Supreme Lord automatically receives the blessings of the goddess of fortune. Further down in the next paragraph, Prabhupada writes, a person who goes to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for material gain is gradually purified in association with the Supreme Lords. How he gets purified, that Krishna knows. Thus he becomes free from all material desires and is elevated to the platform of spiritual life. Unless one is raised to the spiritual platform, it is not possible for him to completely transcend all material contamination. Prabhupada is glorifying Suniti as a far-seeing woman. She had a great foresight, a great vision, and therefore she advised her son to worship the Supreme Lord and no one else. And then Prabhupada is commenting on Padma Palasha Lochanat. When a person is fatigued, if he sees a lotus flower, all his fatigue can be immediately reduced to nil. Similarly, when an aggrieved person sees the lotus face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately all his grief is reduced. On that point, we have a quote from the 3rd canto of the Bhagavatam. Please go ahead. You have to go ahead about 4 or 5 slides. Jaldi karo. One more. Hasam Hare Ravana Avana Avana Hasam Hare Ravantha Khila Loka Tibra Shokashru Sagara Vishoshanam Atyudaram Sammohanaya Rachitam Nijamaya Yasya Bhru Mandalam Munikrite Makaradvajasya. Please read.
A yogi should similarly meditate on the most benevolent smile of Lord Sri Hari, a smile which, for all those who bow to him, dries away the ocean of tears caused by intense grief. The yogi should also meditate on the Lord's arched eyebrows, which are manifested by his internal potency in order to charm the sex god for the good of the sages. Purport: the entire universe is full of miseries, and therefore the inhabitants of this material universe are always shedding tears out of intense grief. There is a great ocean of water made from such tears, but for one who surrenders unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the ocean of tears is at once dried up. One need only see the charming smile of the Supreme Lord. In other words, the bereavement of material existence immediately subsides when one sees the charming smile of the Lord.
Okay, so this is the benefit, the glory of seeing the beautiful smiling face of the Lord. The Shokashru Sagara Vishoshanam. So the ocean of tears which has been created by the grief and the lamentation of all the materialistic people, that is immediately dried up when one sees the beautiful smiling face of the Lord. And so therefore, very important to have regular darshan of the beautiful smiling face of the Lord, then we can also smile. Okay, so these are the instructions which Suniti gives to Dhruva Maharaj, very beautiful instructions. And then begins the next section where Narad Muni comes on the scene, and then Narad Muni begins to speak to Dhruva Maharaj. Before going into the verses, we would just like to touch on one philosophical theme which somewhere comes even in Suniti's instructions and which comes in Narad Muni's talks also. So he mentions that why are you lamenting? Why are you lamenting just because somebody insulted? After all, you're just a small boy. And in any case, whatever happiness, distress that comes in one's life, that is simply because of one's own past misdeeds. And so, in this connection, there is that wonderful conversation between Maharaj Parikshit and the bull, where Maharaj Parikshit asked the bull, who is the cause of your misery, of your suffering? And then we find the bull, Dharma in the form of a bull. He only says that, okay, there are some philosophers say this, some philosophers say that, some philosophers say this. He gives a whole list. And then finally he says, oh, dear king, you decide for yourself. Who is the cause? He does not point out to any one person as to who is the cause of his suffering. So, in that connection, please go behind. So, Bhushan Prabhu, in his book Unveiling His Lotus Feet, writes some very important points in that connection. One more. Okay, go ahead. Okay, please read.
Generally, on reflecting on the cause of one's difficulty, one would answer with less philosophy and more accusation. By identifying someone as the doer and viewing that person as an enemy, one comes to seek vengeance rather than to practice introspection. While one tends to justify thoughts of retaliation and the ensuing plan of action, one may not realize that those actions will implicate him in painful exchanges for hundreds of births. In addition, by meditating on another's bad qualities, one will develop those qualities himself. One's mentality is found by the object of his meditation. A grassworm confined in a hole of a wall by a bee always thinks of the bee in fear and enmity and later becomes a bee simply because of such remembrance.
Okay,
Bhagavatam 7.
so this is, so Anand Prabhu, we are trying to address your question. So here he's mentioning that whenever somebody does any harm to us, like in this case, Dhruva is harmed by Suruchi. So the tendency is always to blame. This person is the cause of my suffering. This person is the cause of my suffering. This person is the cause of my suffering. And as he's saying over here, one would answer with less philosophy and more accusation. At that time, when one is very much influenced by the lower modes of Rajas and Tamas, then immediately one tends to get into the blame game rather than practice some introspection. But when one comes to seek vengeance, revenge, just like in the case of Dhruva Maharaj, he wants revenge. So that's usually the tendency. But then he says that when one thinks of getting some revenge, when one thinks of doing something bad to others, something ill to others, what is the result? The result is one implicates oneself in so many reactions. So two results, he says. One result is one will get the reaction of one's bad thoughts, bad activities. The second point is that when we contemplate on another's bad qualities, then we also get those bad qualities. So if we are thinking, all the time we're thinking, oh, this person, he's so cruel, he's so harsh, he doesn't understand me, this is injustice. So we're constantly meditating on that person. Now we're chanting Hare Krishna, but that person is coming in the mind. All his bad qualities are coming in the mind. And what we are doing, instead of meditating on the Supreme Lord who's full of good qualities, we are meditating on the bad qualities of a person. And as we are meditating on those qualities, those same qualities will come in us also. And so therefore, he says it's better to practice some introspection and think, why? Why has this happened? Is this person the cause or is something else the cause? So it is better to take the blame on oneself, as Dharma himself is showing through his own example, and think that I am to be blamed ultimately. Anybody else is simply an instrument of my own bad karma. Now somebody may ask a question, okay, somebody is doing harm to me. Somebody is insulting me. Somebody is torturing me. Somebody is doing injustice to me. Then what should I do? My bad karma. So should I just keep quiet? What's your understanding? उनको mic दे दो.
When we are the subordinate, we should keep quiet. When we are the authority, you should take action. This is material rule and universal rule.
Where is this universal rule mentioned? Which Shastra can you please give reference?
This is Kali Puran.
Where does it exist?
We are our daily life. We are seeing and observing.
Okay, but you will have to show us where is the Puran. Okay, somebody else. So what should we do in such a situation practically? We see somebody is insulting, somebody is harming. Anybody else? Okay, please give to Shri Kumar Krishna. Hey.
If one is rooted, like, you know,
If one is
rooted in his Krishna consciousness, he will refer in his life, Guru, how he has led his life, or like how the Shastras are teaching. Or else if he's like a practicing, struggling, conditioned soul. So in that case, at least I'm that second stage. So I'll take the help of seniors. So how to see it? Because immediately to follow this principle, it needs a good guidance, and that quality is required. If it is not there, consult the seniors. They will share their experiences, because currently they might have been undergoing, because they're also in the institutional phase. So this is what I do in my personal life.
Okay, good. Thank you. Somebody else would like to share some points? Yes, Andadip.
To understand that whatever dukkha apparently is coming is because of past karma is the true fact of the matter. And then what to do in that is according to dharma, what is guided by Guru Sadhu Shastra. So we act like what is our adhikar, what is our role play in that situation. Deshkal Patra applies. And that we have to see freshly, that right action has to be taken. As per my, like a Brahmana may have a forgiveness principle, a Kshatriya may have to deal with it in another way. So everyone has his own role play in that situation. And whatever Guru Sadhu Shastra say that you should do this way, so then it is appropriate.
Okay, good point. Okay, Sundarshan.
Hare Krishna. One should approach some superior, as here Dhruva Maharaj is approaching Suniti, who is guiding him appropriately. Similarly, Vedvyas, he had despondency after doing such a noble work. So then also he thought of his Guru Narad Muni. So whether the misery is caused by one's own mind and actions or by some others, one should better consult somebody who is free from that problem and who could not only just sympathize with you, but or blame somebody else, but he will be able to help you to come out of the problem.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's see what Burjan Prabhu is saying. I mean, very much in line with what has been said. Somebody can read this, please. Wherever the mic is, please read.
An accurate understanding of what occurs, therefore, exists on more than one level. If one is being unreasonably beaten by a man with a stick, he will be injured and must defend himself or suffer great pain. Despite the beating being ultimately God's grace, the beater may not have one's best interest in mind. Dealing on this level demands prompt and practical action. While acting practically, however, one should nevertheless remember Krishna's ultimate control, because Krishna is the ultimate doer. Maintaining this awakens while
Awareness.
acting. Maintaining this awakens while
awareness.
while acting with free one from envy, anxiety, and anger, and will carry one to Krishna's lotus feet.
Okay, that font is a little small, I think. I'll read it myself. Seeing all that occurs as Krishna's will, a devotee understands that not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a person remains free of anxiety even amidst the greatest difficulties. Still, Along with maintaining this vision, he must act practically while simultaneously remaining detached from the results of his action. So one has to do the needful. According to Guru Sadhu Shastra, whatever is the needful, that needs to be done. But at the same time, one has the proper vision that Krishna is in ultimate control. Krishna is my best well-wishing friend. Not a blade of grass moves without the will of the Lord. And with that proper understanding, without anxiety, one does the needful. Doing the needful could mean approaching the seniors and taking advice, or whatever practical action needs to be done at that point of time. And we end on Srila Prabhupada's quote on the subject. Please read.
Don't think that things are taking place automatically. Therefore, even in reverse condition, a devotee does not see that this thing is happening without direction of Krishna. Even if he is in an adverse condition, he does not feel any pain because he knows that this adverse condition is also under the direction of Krishna. So I am fully surrendered to Krishna. Why I shall take the adverse position as not mercy of Krishna? This is also mercy of Krishna. Tattenukampam shushukakshamano bhunjan evatmakrutam vipakam. A devotee is not disturbed by adverse condition. He takes that this is a gift of Krishna. Tattenukampam. It is Krishna's mercy. Although I am put into difficulty, it is Krishna's mercy. So anyone who takes in that way, mukti pade sadayabha. He is going back to home, back to God, and is guaranteed because he takes everything as Krishna's mercy.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Granthra Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Samved Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. We'll continue tomorrow with